Hello. Welcome to Constructing Limited, where I'm going to discuss all of my thought processes while constructing limited environments such as sealed, cube, and whatever else I end up working on. And today we're going to talk about a very special card. We are going to talk about Performapal Sky Magician Girl. She's a level 5 wind spellcaster with 2000 attack, 1500 defense, and she has a summoning condition that requires you to control a continuous spell. It's an activated effect, keep that in mind, and if this card is special summoned from the hand, you can send a level 4 or lower light spellcaster from your deck to the graveyard. And as the last thing you can do, if it leaves the field, you can target a spell trap on the field and destroy it. It has a lot of utility, actually. It's a very decently statted monster that can get over a lot of the smaller things your opponent control on the board. There's a few of those here that can be a little troublesome, but also it's a very easy card to use as link material. After getting its initial benefits, you can link it off for Nightmare Phoenix to pop in a back row, Cross Sheep if you want to try to reborn the monster you sent, Haggard Lizardo so that you can maybe use that to in tandem to increase a monster you control or decrease a monster your opponent controls. So you're getting functionally 2 removals out of the 1 summon. And there's just a lot of other useful bits from her that is just really valuable. Her being a level 5 means that if you're in a pinch and you need to make a Stardust or something, a lot of the tuners are like level 3 and level 2. You can make Stardust, you can make Clearwing, potentially, Kui Belt, Wind Pegasus Agnister. There's a lot of options in that regard. She also lines up well with a couple of other cards that could potentially be used with the Bujinki Link 2 that can maybe get a couple things on the board. There's a couple of things you can do here. But the biggest part of her effect, of course, is the fact that she sends a level 4 or lower light spellcaster to the graveyard. And there's a decent few options in here. You have all the branded women, the light spellcaster level 4 tuners, like Quem, Cartesia, if the other Ecclesias were in here. You got the White Forest monsters. They're all light spellcasters that are level 4 or lower in the main deck. And of course, you have the Perform Mages of Damage Juggler and Trick Clown. One being able to search any of the Perform Mages that you have in your deck, the other being a free extender that generally works with any of the decks, being free fodder for Link or Xyz summoning. And it really has like a very special spot of being able to work with continuous spells in particular, because it lines up well with the Snake Eye portion of this pack and the Millennium portion of the pack. They're very small packages, but both are very strong little engines. You could potentially make a whole deck just revolving around setting monsters into the back row as continuous spells, like the Millenniums, like the Snake Eyes, and just any other means to get there. Which makes her very valuable as just another free monster you can summon that gets you a little more material, because this deck in particular wants to take advantage of Link summoning since they don't really have any level overlaps, but have a lot of just big guys that can easily go in for a bit of damage. And of course, with their utility in something like the White Forest Toy Box potential deck that you can make, or play it in the Perform Mage deck, if you're running Draco Awakening to search Luster Pendulum so you can get more value out of your plush fires, as well as any other effects you might be using in like a different deck like the True Kings. It's just another free guy you can summon there. That gets you some nice value because you're running multiple continuous spells like the Draco Awakening, like the Overlay Network, and vice versa. Back in the White Forest pile, you might be considering Branded Regain as another continuous spell that enables you, like the Toy Box. While there's not too many continuous spells in the pack. There's just enough along with the other mechanics that makes it very valuable to have a monster that can be used in tandem with some of these other decks. And it's not too hard to have access. It's searchable off of Performapal Joker. And if you're running something like Pendulum, you might be able to get a little bit of material on board, make Beyond the Pendulum, and even get that going before your normal summon so that you can get more advantage out of that. Or just, if you draw her, you can summon her out during your Pendulum summon, since all it needs to do is be specialed from your hand. In fact, in that regard, you could also use Toy Tank to also special it from your hand if you are in a little bit of a pinch and need a level 5 on board, or just be able to get it onto the board to get a little more advantage through. In case if something like your Quem got negated. It honestly has a lot of utility here. And there's also some higher end continuous spells like Branded Lost and Crimson Gaia, which make it even more valuable extender in those decks, like Resonator, since one of the things they might be missing is a ease of access to potential synchros if they don't draw well. And this is another 5 that can summon for free under those conditions, as well as be removable on top of that. It's honestly a very interesting card. It doesn't see play all the time throughout the testing. Some people have not liked it too much, but I think it's a very interesting tool to have and has been kind of the basis of this whole pack. It was the first card that really got my brain going, really got the gears turning. And with that, there are a few specific cards that unfortunately couldn't have made it in. Stuff like Mystic Piper, I think was a very funny include. There was an early version of this pack where there's a more level 1 suite, which there's a little regret not being able to fit that in now, especially since we have Popular in here, like just an amazing level 1 monster that you would want to get full advantage out of. And some other potential suggestions or targets for the effect would be Blue Eyes, particularly Master with Eyes of Blue is like a great one that just as you get back some advantage and immediately gets you a Blue Eyes out of the deck, or out of your graveyard rather. And it could have been used with Spirit with Eyes of Blue to get the field spell. It's a very interesting line that I only excluded only because at the time I was really trying to aim for cards that don't see a lot of use, cards that aren't thought about too much in a competitive sense. And I know White Forest is in here, but like in that time frame, White Forest was more of a fun deck than a good deck. Like it was rogue viable, which is not bad, but it's just definitely still not a deck people really looked at. And even now that's still the case in large part. But being able to try to have Blue Eyes, especially in a time frame where they got the structure deck and they've been topping, like it's a bit more of a competent deck that has a lot more behind it, to where I felt like that was not ideal to maybe consider. Another potential one was Centurion. It's also another deck that has a Light Spellcaster in it. That's actually really good in Primera. The issue is, one, trying to figure out the lines there. That one's probably the much more complicated thing with Cross Sheep. And two, it's kind of requires a lot more resources in the pack that I wasn't sure if I wanted to give to that, because early on I also decided I wanted to put insects in the pack, which is a bit not really great in terms of meshing too well with the rest of the cards. I just was personally interested in trying to see what I could do with it in a limited setting, and has actually kind of worked out in some ways. But that's going to be for another video for that. Primera also being this card that's really strong and gets the deck going, has a problem where the archetype itself isn't made up with continuous spells. It's made of continuous traps. So you're not given this freebie of just like, oh, they have at least something that Sky Magician Girl can synergize with. Unfortunately, them being traps instead of spells really conflicts with that. Unlike the Millenniums, to where I ended up deciding should be here. Because a little later on in the pack's development, I realized I don't think I particularly care too much if they're necessarily meta-relevant cards. So I was a little more lenient to let specifically a small batch of cards like the Snake Eyes that I did allow in being popular, Diabell Star, and Divine Temple, along with Subversion. Like, I think that's a fine enough package to where it's not doing any damage outside of maybe the actual extra deck monsters, but those aren't limited to specifically being Snake Eye cards. They're more just generic bosses that work with the Snake Eye cards well. And the Millenniums are another way to really encourage that back row monster idea a bit that meshes better with Sky Magician Girl in comparison to Centurion as a whole. And of course, now with Magistus, that one's more just it being a bit late to be on my radar is a big one. And 2 is also one of the few decks I actually don't know that well. It with Witchcrafter is not really cards I'm too familiar with to really use them effectively, and I would not want to just try to force something that I'm not familiar with. But might be an interesting idea to try out in the future, since they're kind of in this space to where they're at best a side engine for one of the top decks, which is a good place to be, but doesn't really show off them very well as a full deck themselves. And then there's some continuous spells that were considered here. Pendulum Evolution's the big one that just didn't make the cut. There's a lot of experimentation with having Odd Eyes in here as a 2500 attack pendulum monster that you can search in low rarity, but it proved to be a little too strong in the actual sense of just doing so much damage that I did not feel it was comfortable to have in. Like, sure, Millennium summons a bunch of big guys, but at the cost of half your life points. You are committing to this play and putting yourself at a disadvantage in that respect, which can matter, all things considered. As well as, I think Branch had a very short time frame in here, because I thought it'd be a very neat idea to try it out, just to see how funny it would be for a card like Branch to actually make it in. A very old spell card. When a fusion monster on the field is destroyed by our card effects in the grave, you target one of the materials and summon it. It's pretty neat, a little too cute. Giant Ball Game is another one that's also was in here very recently, just dropped it. It was a very recent drop from the pack. At the end of the day, it felt a little too situational. It's weird almost that it's just like, it's a fine card, but just not necessarily strong enough in the context of the pack to where it was like, oh yes, we were actually getting full advantage out of this card. A lot of the time, you'd rather just have more insects, was kind of the big issue. Not needing another way to get another guy from the grave, especially level 6 or lower, was just not necessarily what you wanted out of it. And the big one, since there's a Synchron package here, Arrive Light is the last continuous spell that's really notable. Was in here until they finally put in the new support for Junk Warrior and the Junk Warrior Extreme. Scrap Synchron, Scrap Warrior, and the like. That just meshes better with the pack, I think. It gives more interesting opportunities with using Scrap Synchron as a means to go into Jet Warrior, which is good removal and nice for Synchron. To have a modular guy that can swap out some tuners to be a non-tuner that's a pretty high level to make some bigger guys. As well as Arrive Light's requirement to interact with a level 1 dragon makes it very niche in terms of like what options can really work in the pack when I was aiming for a goal of having multiple targets for everything. And there's not enough level 1 dragons that felt, or I felt comfortable with including. The only one really being Brotar. That's actually like good. All the other ones are either a little too specific or just not good monsters. They're just kind of very middling at best. Like you got Black Metal Dragon, which is a very strong card, but then requires a whole Red Eye setup. Mimicool Dragon, another strong card, but specific for entire archetype. Going back to Blue Eyes. Maybe in a different timeline, Blue Eyes could have made it in instead of the insects, which would have been interesting. Like, there's definitely a lot of interesting ideas with that, but it's just not worth the time. And I didn't necessarily want to include a vanilla that you could pull too much of. Like, if someone pulled like 7 Blue Eyes, but like missed out on Cosmic, they'd be pretty pissed. Now, I try to avoid the pack variant being an issue as much as I can. And, of course, the actual archetype related targets of Converging Wills Dragon and Majestic Dragon and Stardust Worm. I think there's one other one. Like, none of these are very great. Stardust Xiaolong is possibly shockingly the closest one to being decent because it just summons itself from the graveyard. But even then, it's still very niche and isn't good enough in my eyes to do what I want it to do. Especially when I wasn't like making it easy to climb up into one of the higher tiered synchros that needed like a synchro monster to make outside of exactly Satellite Warrior. And that one shouldn't also have these millions of hoops to jump through to get there. Overall, though, I'm very happy that Performapal Sky Magician Girl has made it up to this point, and feels like it has its own home in this continuous spell monster deck that's functionally a Snake Eyes Millennium, but not in the sense of something you would have seen on Master Duel. It's more aligned with this format and feels more tailored to actually being more like Snake Eyes Diabellstar control with a couple of extra strong pieces. And honestly, I really appreciate that. And I think that's going to be everything I'm going to say for now. Look out for some shorts coming out. I'm going to be trying to do my best to keep up with making content now. I think this is going to be the start of a decent few videos on this pack in particular, and I'm also going to be working on new packs and maybe going over some of my old packs and talking about mistakes I made early on, because I can definitely say there were a decent few. Working on pack design ever since Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck added the pack design function has really made things very interesting, and hopefully with videos like this and me just pushing how I've been designing stuff, I really hope Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck maybe gives us a little more options in terms of pack design. It's very limited right now, but that's a different story entirely. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, this was Tach. Toodles. Bop.